Jason Martin. He is someone who is well known and loved by our congregation. He asked that before he come up to preach that I read from John chapter 11. Now, get comfortable because it's a little long, okay? The death of Lazarus. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days, and then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daylight will not stumble, for they see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in their loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, Could not he have opened the eyes of the blind man, have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Amen.
All right. Good morning. It's so great to see all of you here today. As Bridget mentioned, for those of you who don't know, I'm Jason Martin, and I was a longtime member of this church, and it was such a wonderful thing to be a part of this church. When we moved away a year and a half ago, this church was one of two things that I was really regretting having to leave, the other being our house. I liked our house. But we've really missed the people here, the vibe here, the fellowship, the love of God and the love of others here. And I'm always excited when I get to reconnect with the people here. It is an honor and a privilege to be speaking to you today on this first Sunday of the Pride Month of the year. Happy Pride to all who celebrate. And I want to talk this morning about some difficult feelings and difficult experiences that we have. And the reason why I want to do that is because I think that there are experiences that a lot of times make us human, that are part of being human, that we would rather not engage with. And I want to start by talking about something we don't often want to think about, which is death and grief. Over the last 5 years, my extended family, we've experienced, as all families do, various deaths in our family. About 4.5 years ago, my grandfather died after kind of a steady degression, at the age of 91. And he was a true patriarch, and he was just a big personality. And my family is a family of performers. We perform in theater and music, and all of that is descended from my grandfather. And then about 2 years later, his son, my uncle, my dad's brother, also died. And in fact, Dale Martin, who, if you go back and look in the archives of the Vine podcast, Warren and I interviewed my uncle on the podcast. He was a biblical scholar who taught at Duke and Yale universities, and then retired. And he passed away now about 2.5 years ago. And then about 2 years ago, my mom's brother, my Uncle Richard, who was a public school teacher for many years, he had a stroke a few months earlier, and he passed away about 2 years ago. And that death was particularly important. Now, honestly, I hadn't remained very close to that uncle, but that was the last of my mom's immediate family to pass away. Her parents had long since died. Her older brother, her sister-in-law, who she was really close to, had died. And this uncle was the last of her immediate family. And neither of her brothers had kids either, so we didn't have any cousins, nieces, nephews around as well. And then finally, about 8 months ago, another uncle died, also my brother's younger brother, or my dad's younger brother. And, that one had been coming for a little while. He had been ill, and he passed away. And he died at the age of 70. They had all lived very, full lives, long lives. And they died earlier than any of us wanted them to have. We would have loved to have had them longer in our life, but death comes for us all, and it often comes for the young as well. When I was in graduate school about 26 or 27 years ago, one of my classmates her younger sister, who was a senior in high school at the time, was tragically killed in a car accident when she and her boyfriend were on their way to school, their senior year of high school, and another driver ran a red light and killed them. And that was a tragic thing to have to experience through my classmate, and it was just really striking. A lot of us went to her funeral, and it was in this huge old church in Amarillo that was absolutely full, completely full. Thousands of people attended this memorial service, and a lot of people were grieving the untimely death of this 18-year-old girl. More recently, the young son of a friend of mine whom I grew up with and went to church with when I was a kid, he actually was really good friends with one of my brothers. His son, who was 9 years old at the time, was diagnosed with a brain tumor and died within 6 months. He was 9 years old, and this was, I think, maybe about a year ago or so. And as difficult as all of those deaths are, my grandfather, my uncles, the young deaths, the deaths that come about almost suddenly out of nowhere, those are the ones that leave us particularly despairing and confused and scared and alone. I remember experiencing a little bit of that a little more than a year ago. Carrie, my wife, was out of town on a business trip, and I was home by myself. And long story short, out of the blue, our 6-year-old dog, who was the best dog I ever knew, had a ruptured artery and died within 6 hours. And honestly, I can say with that was the most difficult death I've ever had to endure, which sounds silly to some people when talking about a dog, but if you have a dog or a cat or another close pet, you probably can relate to some of that. In fact, I was thinking about it. The only thing that I could imagine being worse would be if one of my kids or my wife were to suddenly die. Those were so hard, and it's taken us a long time to grieve that. So the story of Lazarus, or Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead that Bridget read for us earlier, is a story that many of us are already familiar with. Even if you don't know the details, you hear the story of a man dying and you think, well, Jesus is going to make it right. Jesus is going to raise him from the dead. But as all of us who have experienced grief and the death of a loved one can attest to, that's not always the way it goes. In fact, that's the exception to the norm. And grief is hard and it is powerful. And we know the ending of the story is coming. We know that Jesus indeed is going to raise Lazarus from the dead and all will be well. We know the triumph. Jesus performs one of his greatest miracles, quite literally reinfusing life where there had been none before. But the gospel writer John does not hurry to get us there. There's a full 32 verses of text and story and teaching between when we are told that Lazarus has died in verse 11, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, until Jesus calls him out of the tomb in verse 43. He cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." Within those 32 verses in between there are a wealth of emotions felt and described in the text. John, the gospel writer, slows us down and walks us through a landscape of emotions that most of us are trained culturally, spiritually, even theologically to avoid. John walks us through fear, grief, frustration, confusion, anger, despair. It's very easy to flatten this story and talk about it simply as a resurrection story. But really what it is a story about what it means to be human. not only before anything was resolved, but as part of the resolution itself. And the deeper truth, I believe, is this, that the story would look very different if the grief wasn't there, if the despair wasn't there. The grief would be treated very as unnecessary. You shouldn't have cried. Everything turned out fine. The fear would be revealed as misguided. There was nothing to worry about. Why were you concerned? The despair would be corrected. You just needed more faith. But John 11 does none of that. Before Jesus even arrives in Bethany, the disciples are afraid. Jesus suggests returning to Judea, and they push back. They say, they were just trying to stone you. Now, that's not an abstract fear. That's a fear for life. That's an embodied survival level fear. And then Thomas, who is often remembered for his doubt after Jesus' own death and resurrection, says something very striking. Thomas says, "Let us go that we may die with him." It's a line that carries resignation, courage, and dread all at once. It's not heroic in a triumphant sense. It's a heavy, reluctant faith. And it suggests that fear does not cancel out faith. It isn't unfaithful to be afraid. Instead, it accompanies it. I actually don't like the phrase, faith not fear. Now, I get what it's trying to say. And perhaps for many, it's indeed a statement of encouragement and hope and courage. And if that's you, if you get comfort and reassurance from faith not fear, that's fine. I'm not trying to take anything away from you. But for me, when I hear that phrase, faith not fear, I hear it as suggesting that fear is not part of the gospel, that it's not part of a faithful life, when I believe that it is. We sometimes imagine that spiritual maturity looks like the absence of fear, but in this story, fear is simply part of the landscape of following Jesus. It's part of the emotional morass that we as humans engage in. Fear is not the enemy of faith. It's often the context within which faith is practiced. It's the environment where we encounter and use our faith to connect us better to God. And so in John 11, Jesus intentionally delays going to Lazarus and the family. Now, I won't pretend to know exactly why. You know, in the text, Jesus says, so that people may believe. Theologians have debated exactly what that means, and I'm not going to necessarily go into that here. But by the time Jesus arrives, the emotional tone has shifted. Now we're in the territory of grief. Martha meets Jesus first, and what she says is as raw as anything in Scripture, in my opinion. In verse 32, Martha says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Very accusatory, but also very heavy with grief. Mary says almost the exact same words a little later. And as we know from other stories in the gospel, Mary and Martha are sisters, and they have very different personalities, but they have the same sentence. They're having a very similar emotional response, one of grief, maybe even one of anger, maybe one of resentment. And it's a sentence that carries that grief, but also disappointment. It represents the collision of love and loss. If you had been here, implying you should have been here. If you had come sooner. If things had gone differently. If I had not run that red light. If my loved one had only listened to me when I tried to give them advice. If we had not made that one critical mistake. If God had simply intervened. That is what we feel. Jesus, why didn't you make this right? Why didn't you protect the weak, protect the vulnerable, save those who needed your redemption, your salvation? And what is striking is that Jesus does not correct them. When they say, if you had been here, Jesus doesn't say, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not fair. He doesn't say you shouldn't feel that way. He doesn't say trust in me more. He doesn't even defend his own timing. He receives their grief, even as it's tangled with frustration and disappointment and anger. He takes it. He hears it. He connects with it. In fact, Jesus grieves with them. Despite his divinity, despite what he can do, Jesus weeps. Famously, John chapter 11, verse 35 is the shortest verse in the Bible. Depending on the translation that you have, it's either 2 or 3, maybe 4 words, but usually 2. Jesus wept. And it seems odd to me that verse would only contain a couple of words, but it's in the power of those words where the verse contains its weight. Jesus wept. The Son of God, the man who had the Spirit of God within him, the man who would in fact raise Lazarus from the dead only 8 verses later, Jesus has already spoken about resurrection. He's already indicated that death will not be the end, and yet he is weeping. He's crying. He's experiencing human emotions that we can all relate to, and he lets it come upon him. He doesn't shove it aside or chastise himself or try to pretend like he's not crying or turn away or look aside. He weeps. And he's not weeping because he lacks power. He's weeping because he refuses to be distant from those human emotions, those human experiences. He allows himself to be affected, to be moved, to feel. And this matters because many of us have internalized the idea that difficult emotions are problems to be solved rather than experiences to be lived. We try to move quickly past grief, to numb fear, to overcome despair, or avoid it altogether. We try to reframe anger before we've really felt it. But Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't rush. He doesn't bypass. He doesn't spiritualize away the moment. He doesn't say you just need to pray harder, ask God for healing. He just fully inhabits the moment and the emotions and all they are there for. So emotions are not interruptions to life. They're part of what makes us human. Grief reveals love. Fear reveals vulnerability. Despair reveals limits of our control. And frustration reveals longings for things to be different. Lazarus does, in fact, come out of the tomb. But notice the story doesn't rewind. The grief was real, the fear was real, the despair was real, the tears were real. Jesus really wept, as did everyone else there. The miracle doesn't invalidate those experiences, but instead it reveals something deeper, that life can emerge, but it doesn't come by avoiding the fullness of human experience. Jesus does not bring life by denying death. He brings life by entering it, by inhabiting the emotions. Now, Jesus experiences lots of other emotions. If you read through the Gospels, you see Jesus demonstrating a lot of emotions that we might characterize as quote-unquote bad or wrong. Anger at the money changers at the temple, fear in the Garden of Gethsemane, and disappointment in his disciples in that same garden. So I believe that fear and these kinds of emotions are an invitation not to become people who avoid difficult emotions, but to become people who remain fully present in them. To not rush ourselves or others out of grief, to not shame fear, to not dismiss despair, to not try to correct the other people's emotions. My profession is I'm a marriage and family therapist. It's a form of psychotherapy. And one of the most critically important and valuable, and I actually teach that at Abilene Christian University, one of the most important and critical aspects of being a therapist is being able to sit with difficult emotions. When clients come in, it isn't my job. In fact, it's actually counterproductive for me to say, you shouldn't be feeling that way. In fact, I try to train my students to remove the word should from their vocabulary altogether. Feelings are not bad. They sometimes feel bad, for sure, but no feeling is in and of itself bad or wrong. Now, we can respond in ways that can make things worse. That's a different conversation, how we respond. But engaging with the emotion, feeling and experiencing the emotion is never wrong. If you're carrying something heavy today, fear, grief, frustration, despair, this story does not tell you to just set it aside, move on. It tells you that these experiences are what it means to be human. And more than that, it tells you that you're not alone within them. Jesus doesn't stand outside your emotions waiting for you to resolve them. He stands right there with you, beside you, and he weeps. My mother, who I said lost her last, family member from her family of origin about 2 years ago. Her mother, my grandmother, died when I was in high school, and her father died a few years later of Alzheimer's when I was in college. And my mom, and that's been now 35 or so years ago at this point, and my mom still grieves the loss of her parents deeply. I still get text messages periodically. Today would have been Daddy's 106th birthday. Or my Uncle Johnny, she would say, Brother Johnny's would have been 82 today. She still sends those messages, and she's still grieving decades after they have died. She honors their birthdays and sometimes their death days. Her grief is still very deeply felt. Now, some might feel that my mom should have moved on. And in a sense, she has. She's not overwhelmed by the grief. It's not keeping her in despair all the time. But that doesn't mean that she grieves any less. It means that she grieves with Jesus at her side. And from within that shared human experience, Christ speaks life, our life, your life, the life of what it means to be a human. Let us embrace the life within, the joy and the grief, the fear and the vulnerability, and know that God is with us throughout. Amen.
Thank you so much, Jason. That was beautiful. As someone who has experienced grief, I really connect with that. So thank you so much. We are now going to enter into our time of communion, and before that, we will do our prayer of confession together. I will read the parts in white, and together we will read the parts in yellow. We confess to each other and to you, our Creator, that we fall short of being what we were created to be and what we have committed ourselves to be. Hear us, forgive us, renew our resolve to build the kingdom of Christ. We often seek out the easiest paths of least involvement in places where we might be uncomfortable, or paths of self-centeredness. Hear us, forgive us, renew our resolve to build the kingdom of righteousness. We confess that we have not loved you with all of our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and with all our strength. Bring us out of darkness, Lord, and into the light of your love. Hear us, forgive us, renew our resolve to build the kingdom of light. Forgive us for getting so caught up in the world's trappings, in its false messages of hope, that we lose sight of the hope of the kingdom, which brings healing and peace to a world in turmoil. Hear us, forgive us, renew our resolve to build the kingdom of peace. May we resolve to become more kingdom-minded, to be peacemakers here and now. Amen.
I have heard of the majesty and wonder of you, King of heaven. In humility I bow as your love, and wave after wave crashes over me, crashes over me. For you are for us, you are not against us. Champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. I have heard you calling my name. I have heard the song of love that you sing. Oh, so I will let you draw me out beyond the shore into your grace. Oh, your grace as your love, and wave after wave crashes over me, crashes over me. For you are for us, and you are not against us. Champion of heaven, you made a way for all to enter in. And you make me brave, you make me brave. You call me out beyond the shore into the waves. You make me brave, you make me brave. No fear can hinder now the love that made a way. You make me brave.
Thank you guys for being here with us this morning. We have one final song. If you wouldn't mind standing with us, we're going to sing that song, and then I will go ahead and pray for the food for our potluck and dismiss us here to go over there and enjoy some of our summer favorites. He is jealous for me. Love's like a hurricane. I am a tree bending beneath the weight of his wind and mercy. When all of a sudden I am unaware of these afflictions eclipsed by glory, I realize just how beautiful you are and how great your affections are for me. Oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us so. You know how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us. How he loves us so. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves. Yeah, he loves us. Oh, how he loves us. Oh, how he loves.
his portion, and he is our prize. Drawn to redemption by the grace in his eyes. If grace is an ocean, we are sinking. In heaven meets earth like an unforeseen kiss. In my heart it turns violently inside of my chest. And I don't have time to maintain these regrets when I think about the way, oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us, how he loves us so. And oh, how he loves us so. Oh, how he loves us, how he loves us so.
God, your love. Your love is overarching. It covers everything. Your Son felt that love for those he knew and had to pause and weep. With all of the power and all of the might that he has, fear, family, faithfulness, friends, he was truly human, and you sent him to die for us. God, we thank you for that sacrifice of your Son so that we too can experience that. God, we love you with everything that we have. We ask that you remind us of that this week as we go out into the world. It's in your Son's name we pray.